Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to Choose Inclusion and our Black Voices Matter segment, special segment. And I'm Yubi. I'm here with Nina and Mike, my great co-hosts as always. How are you guys this morning?
Doing well, Ubaldo. Thanks for asking. Nina, how are you doing?
I'm doing okay. I'm a little braced right now because I think the podcast we're about to start off is going to be probably one of the most emotional. I'm already crying actually. One of the most emotional ones that we'll ever do, and I feel so humbled, and I don't even have the words for it. Just like humbled, honored, appreciative. I don't know that we have Abe Arrington here today, and I'll let Yubi just jump into the introduction.
Yeah, no, we were lucky to connect with Abe through a great organization here in Colorado called Defy, and they work with incarcerated people to help them to teach them and help them build their own business plan. And so Abe was, I believe, one of their first. Abe Arrington was one of their first students, but Abe was wrongfully convicted and imprisoned here in Colorado about 30 years ago. He was actually recently granted immediate clemency by Governor Polis, and so we're going to talk about that. He's also the founder of Imotech Geoengineering. He's a care manager at Second Chance here in Colorado. And yeah, Abe, it's really just an honor to have you on the show. Thank you so much for agreeing to do it. And this is a part one because there's so much we want to talk about. So part two is tomorrow, and where we'll dive into your entrepreneurial story. But first of all, how are you doing, Abe?
Well, I'm doing great, and I want to say first and foremost too, it's an honor for you guys to give me a chance to speak and to basically give me a voice about some of the different subjects that we'll be talking about and diving into.
Yeah, thank you so much. I mean, let's dive in. I mean, let's talk about, because today what we wanted to talk about were the systemic issues, right, that have plagued and continue to plague the Black community since America was born, basically. So can you tell us your story? Tell us, what happened 30 years ago.
Well, 30 years ago, I was a young man. I was an airman in the United States Air Force. I was just completing my time in service. I was a musician. I actually was doing some music at the time, performing and things like that. I decided to go ahead and leave the United States Air Force. I was going to go ahead and do that and get out and continue my life as a civilian. I was married. I was a husband. I was a father. I'm originally from Ohio, but my father lived in Colorado Springs at the time, where I actually had lived some years before I went to high school in Colorado Springs. So I decided to come back to Colorado to basically just stay here for a few months while I went ahead and got my stuff shipped up from Biloxi, Mississippi, where I had been stationed at. And I was planning to move on. I had job offers, pretty much all over the place if I could pass the airframe power plant test to become a certified aircraft mechanic. I've been studying pretty much throughout the spring and all summer to do that. Now it was like around the really almost like winter, fall or whatever. It's like October, late October, I believe it was. So I decided I was going to come back and go to Tennessee, come to Colorado. I had made plans because I had to go to the testing center, which is in Tennessee. And I went down there, got a bus ticket down there and went down there. I think I was down there, maybe a week and a half or something like that, maybe a week at the testing center. I took this test to become a certified aircraft mechanic. Very much confident that I passed all parts of it. At the time, it was 3 parts I took: airframe, power plant, and electrical. And I did. I ended up passing all 3 parts. I think like a 93% average or something like that. So I returned back to Colorado Springs, and 3 days later, I was invited to a party over a family friend's house, and which is really kind of funny. And over the years, I just used to commiserate about this because I didn't even want to go to this party because I was so tired from all the studying I've been doing for the previous months. I just wanted to relax for a few days. But I went to this party, and during the course of the night, some guys had left to go out, presumably to go get some drugs or something like that, which I did not do. I was actually tested upon my arrest. My system was completely clean of any drugs. and very, very, very little alcohol, was, way below the so-called limit, or whatever. And so during that incident, or during whatever they went and done, a guy was killed, who reportedly, and this was told to me actually by police officers and my lawyers alike, when I first was arrested, that the guy was a drug dealer. And it was actually validated by one of the guards when I was by myself incarcerated in county jail, who actually pulled the guy up on the computer and showed that he had an extensive criminal record. The only reason I bother to mention this is because my trial became somewhat different. That was never actually mentioned. And none of this stuff was pretty much, mentioned during the course of my trial. They just, basically fabricated this fictional story that involved me, that put me into this this incident. And I was actually convicted and sentenced to life plus, initially life plus 20 years, 40-year life plus 20 years, 2 consecutive 20-year sentences along with that. And I spent the next 30 years fighting to prove my innocence.
And so you'd mentioned something that had caught my ear when we were, first getting to know you. I mean, this happened in Colorado Springs, and I think everybody, most people remember the movie BlacKkKlansman that came out, I think, a couple years ago, 2018 maybe.
Right.
And so, you were saying that the events that took place or that were represented in that movie really only happened about 10 years before this happened to you.
Yes, I think it was just over a decade. And I found that somewhat morbid amusing.
Right.
Years later, when I saw that, I was like, wow. I guess a decade is really, it's not that long, in the terms when you talk about problems that exist within a certain culture, and of course the police department in this case. A decade is not that long, and I guess you could say I kind of understood at that point why certain things were said to me, when I first got arrested. Like when I was told, quite frankly, by an independent investigator who managed to get in to see me. I still don't even know how that actually took place without my lawyer's approval or knowing about it. But this investigator came in and he so-called read me the riot act. And he had told me just straightforward. I give him credit for being very frank and being honest with me. He told me, Mr. Arrington, he said, the simple fact is, said, you're a black man accused of killing a white man in El Paso County. He said, somebody has to pay for it. And right now it looks like it's going to be you. And he told me quite directly also, he said, it didn't matter if I was innocent. He told me that. And again, I didn't believe that, at the time. You could say I was naive or whatever, but I had tended to believe that, like myself, that most people, would just do the right thing. You know what I mean? Regardless of a person's color, or religion or whatever the heck it was, if it's not right, then and I mean, and the question always like, why? You know what I mean? I mean, why would you want to take a man who is innocent, and put him in prison, and things like that? It just didn't make any sense. I mean, there was talks, for years about a rush to judgment and things like that. But throughout my the process, leading up to my trial and even through my appeals and for years to come, there were always things that came up that just kept proving, well, this is not true. This man, was not there. He had nothing to do with this. And they kept either turning a blind eye to it. In some cases, just, sweeping it under the rug, there were 2 specific instances that came to light about when it became clear that one of my co-defendants, who had testified against me, it became clear, as according to the record, at least twice, that they knew he was lying, that he had lied on the stand. And you had 2 different judges at 2 different times who had advised him on how to cover up his perjury. But one judge went as far as to say that as far as he was concerned, he had gotten away with it, not to say anything about it, not to tell anybody. And which like I said, I still find, to this day, I find that extremely hard to believe that you would do that. And, and this is the evidence against me, by the way, is this man's testimony. You know what I mean? And a pair of other co-defendants who kept changing their testimony, who also, had admitted to being, liars or chronic liars and have mental problems and everything else. And still, people decided that they wanted to cover that up and take that and use that and, and send me to prison with, based upon that right there, so yeah.
Abe, I'm really appreciative of you sharing your story with us. One of the things that you shared on the pre-call was the clemency and
Right.
the rarity around that, because I think it's super important for our audience to hear, like, just how much of an anomaly this was. And I don't know if it's necessarily, if you feel like how you like, I'd love to, again, like 30 years incarcerated, always saying you're innocent. And was this a validation of, your innocence by, the governor? I'd love for you to share that part of the story.
Yes, I mean, definitely, of course, in a lot of ways, I feel that it was, and I'll tell you, I'll tell you again, basically how it happened, and then I'll tell you why I feel that way. Like I said, like I was saying before, I actually like a lot of people, prison, you got this culture, that it's kind of hard to explain, and in sound bites or whatever, but a lot of people had filed for clemency, and I mean a lot, and especially on the Hickenlooper, because at the time Hickenlooper was considered to be the most probably most liberal governor that Colorado had ever, if not at least in recent history. So a lot of people figured, well, hey, maybe he'd be willing to give people, a second chance and so forth and so forth. Me, it was a little bit different because, my filing clemency was going to be based upon my innocence, and people really never filed for clemency, under based upon their innocence. I'm talking about in almost any state across the union. I mean, you can actually get legal arguments and logs and stuff or whatever that are written about that. And the reason why is because most often than not, most governors, or at least their administration, and their advisors will they'll tell the person, hey, well, if you're going to file for clemency, then you have to basically plead. It's like basically almost like taking a plea bargain. You have to admit guilt, and I really didn't want to do that. I just wasn't up to the task as far as I was concerned. I'm like, man, I'm innocent. I don't, and I'm not saying this as far as people who do it. I mean, I can't fault them because I understand the psychology behind it. But no, I wasn't going to do it. My lawyers, we talked about it and everything. So it was filed. My clemency is filed under actual innocence. And most of the time, when you do that, it's not even entertained. They won't even look at it. And so, with that said, under Hickenlooper, my application was actually, passed over. It was actually, they said, we're not going to even rule on this. And not just mine, they did a whole lot of people like that. They said, we're going to go ahead and pass it on to the next administration and let them decide what they want to do with it. And so it was carried over to Polis administration. And there were there were some guys who were given clemency under Hickenlooper, and so by the time my application came around and Polis to make his decision, actually a couple of years later, a lot of the guys who had gotten clemency under Hickenlooper were still incarcerated. They were basically either put up for parole or their sentence was cut where they could make parole in a few years, maybe 5 years down the road or things like that. And so a lot of them were still locked up. And so lo and behold, my application goes to Polis. And this is something else I should point out. Most governors only grant clemency, especially under serious cases like, homicides and murders and things like that, which is what kind of case I had. They usually only grant clemency after their 4th year in office, or when they're presumably going to leave office and things like that. Or maybe they do 2 terms, maybe, their 8th year in office. And so lo and behold, mine goes up before Governor Polis. It was December 20th last year. It hasn't even been a year yet. December 20th. Like I said, I pray I'll never forget. I was at work, and the major, she came, it's Major Trio. She came to where I was at, and she said, "Hey, are you Mr. Arrington?" I said, "Yes, ma'am." She said, "Well, you got to go to the warden's office there, so you have to make a phone call." And I was actually kind of afraid because usually when something like that happens, you have to call home and something has happened at home. And but anyway, we walked in, and there's the warden sitting there, and he asked me, had I applied for clemency, and I told him, "Yes, sir." He said, "We have to call the governor's office. They want to talk to you." And everybody in that room pretty much was believing that it was going to be, maybe something about, maybe them interviewing me and asking me some questions, to further the progression of the application for clemency. And so we called the governor's lawyer, and she got on the phone, and she said, "Mr. Arrington, I wanted to inform you that the governor has agreed to grant you clemency. You'll be eligible for parole as of Monday." And so this is on a Friday. And immediately in my mind, I'm thinking like all these other guys over the past couple of years, previous years, who 2 years before, whatever, who had gotten clemency on a Hickory. And I'm thinking, okay, well, how long will I probably be going up for parole? And immediately, within the second after that, I had this flash in my mind, and she immediately shut that down by telling me, "Mr. Arrington, I want to make it clear that you have been granted a rare immediate clemency. So even if they refuse, the parole board refuses to grant you parole as of any time after Monday, they will not be able to hold you longer than past March 1st. And so that was a big shocker, I mean, for everybody in the room. Like, so I became, of course, that's when I lost. I became very emotional. I could even see the emotion on the warden's face and the major's face, and they were like, "I know you have to be shocked." They said, I'm shocked." That's what I was told. They said, "I'm shocked." They said, "Because this never happens." They said, "This never happens. We thought they were going to ask you some questions." So that's how, that was pretty much the and it was just also, it was, I mean, it's kind of hard to explain to you how crazy this had evolved from, because things had started to happen 2 years prior to that, including one of them was my, signing up for Defy, my patent being granted, and this was like, things started going well, but I didn't, even with the application in, I knew it was an extreme long shot, for me to possibly be granted clemency, and so that's why, after fighting for so many years, and I had fought my case at one point all the way up to the 10th Circuit Federal Court of Appeals on my own, and I believe it was in '06. I believe it was in '06 that I actually was granted my application for appeal to the 10th Circuit Federal Court of Appeals was granted on the grounds of actual innocence, and they took it back 9 months later, saying that I had failed to file something properly or whatever, which was incorrect. But I knew there was a lot going on, or at least I believe there was a lot going on behind the scenes, because again, I had judges who had subverted perjury on my case. I had where the forensics evidence had reportedly, that came back negative in my favor, had reportedly been lost, and a whole lot of other stuff that had happened that was, I guess you might say, can easily be proven to be, judicial misconduct by some of the highest officers in the court. And so, I had came to feel that, I came to feel that, and I was always like, I got to prove my innocence, got to prove my innocence. And at one point, I think a little bit after that, and this is after fighting for, I think at that point, almost 16, 17 years, I was like, who am I trying to prove it to? Because after all the evidence that I've been presenting, it became very clear to me that these people knew that I was actually innocent, and when they had made that ruling, that was really a validation of that. At that point, they just didn't want to. They just didn't want to grant me that because of whatever, I guess you might say, repercussions or whatever might happen with regards to not just the judges themselves, but that the court, in El Paso County and everything else, what that actually would mean, down there is, as far as the possibility of reopening other people's cases and all this other kind of stuff like that. This is what I came to believe in and had reason to believe, from what I had studied, with the law and everything like that, how that works. So by the time Hickenlooper, had decided he wasn't going to rule on my thing, and Polis came along and decided that he was going to grant me, clemency, and I'll give him, a lot of, as we say, props and very, very thankful, very, very grateful for him having the courage to do something that, that so many people who were in a position that were supposed to keep this from happening, just cowardly refused to do. And he showed a lot of courage in doing that. So I definitely appreciate that. And it shows, to me, it actually shows a lot of character on his part that definitely cannot be denied. And this is not just I'm not just saying this because he granted me the clemency, because I knew at that point, I knew what it takes. I know what it must take for him to do that and do it. You got to understand, he did it his first year in office, and that makes it even rare still, because most clemencies aren't even granted until the 4th year. And the ones like for serious cases such as mine usually don't happen until if the person does a second term, maybe 8 years out, or definitely the 4th year at least. And usually it's granted where in such a way where they say, oh, we'll let you get parole like they did a whole lot of the other guys. But in my case, the fact that they entertained it, that it was filed under actual innocence, that they granted it, and that they granted it immediately, they granted it in the first term, it's like something that you probably can really seriously probably can go back and check, and I haven't, but you probably go back and check the history of the state, and I don't think it's ever happened. So that just goes to show you how rare it is.
I thank you for sharing all that, Abe. I really do appreciate that. And then, so you've not even been out of prison for a year, and yet you are immediately, again, I'd love our listeners to know, like the character that you are demonstrating by your giving back. I mean, we're going to talk more about all of your entrepreneurial endeavors next episode, but you're immediately giving back to your community by working for the organization Second Chance. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure, definitely. Second Chance Center is a reentry center that was actually started by a group of returning citizens, formerly incarcerated persons. One of them, Hassan Abdul Latif, the director. I actually met him, came to know him in prison. And almost shortly after I got to Lyman Correctional Facility, we opened up Lyman Correctional Facility. So that just goes to show you how long ago this was. I was the first person to live in my cell at that facility. I got there 10 days after it opened. He got there, I think probably about maybe about a year later or something like that. He got there, and I met him, but I really didn't get to know him until about 2 years later when we ended up at Centennial Correctional Facility. Really great guy, Sean Taylor, his assistant director. I actually was at Lyman with him also. I got to know him at Lyman. So we all have a ton of war stories about each other and about about all of that was going on then, and how all of our situations evolved, because all of us have such compelling stories. I mean, Hassan has his whole story is a very compelling one as far as how he grew up, and he's from New York, and how he ended up out here, and how he ended up incarcerated, and show us Sean Taylor's, because Sean Taylor actually, I tell you something about Sean Taylor, which is really crazy. I don't even know if he even knows this. He was actually one of the reasons why I even decided to bother to even file for clemency, and that's because he was actually granted clemency probably about a decade before I was, and that actually made me even think about that as a possibility, because prior to him being granted clemency, I just never, honestly, I never even thought about it. And but he's really, really great guy. There's Sheikh Adam, who also works there, who helped start the Second Chance Center as well. He did 30 years in the feds. He has a very compelling story. Dana Jenkins, interesting part about her story is that she was actually incarcerated in South Carolina or North Carolina maybe, one of the Carolinas for 6 years, and she was actually leaving. She had done her time in North Carolina in the state system, and she was leaving on her way out the gate, or before she pretty cleared the gate. The feds came and picked her up and took her to the feds, and she spent another 20 years in the federal system. So there's Kelly Booker, there's Khalil Halim, who also was incarcerated here in Colorado. He did 6 years. He did 6 years on an ankle monitor, intensified parole. And so you have all these people who work at the center. And when I got out, I was actually given an opportunity, and it's a very good opportunity, great opportunity to work there. It's a great place. I mean, I really love it. I love the people who I work around. We have somewhat of a similar history, and some of us shared history. And I started working there about a week after I got out. I mean, because I definitely wanted to get to work with helping people who have been incarcerated and stuff like that, restart their lives. That was somewhat therapeutic for me myself. But yeah, they asked me when I got out, when you want to go to work. I mean, I think it was the next day I showed up at the center. They told me to come by, and they had advocated for me also. I should say that, a lot of them. And they said, so when you want to start work? I said, tomorrow. And they all laughed. They said, no, we're not going to let you start tomorrow. They said, you just got out. I said, okay, I'll delay it to next Friday or next Thursday or whatever it was. And they said, okay. And so I started next week and have been working there ever since. And like I said, and it's great. It's even greater when you have guys who come in who you actually knew. And I had a guy come in a few months back, and I sat down to do the intake with him, and we're talking. And because of COVID, we're all wearing masks now and stuff like that. So we're wearing a mask, and he's got a hat on the boot. So he sits down, and I ask him his name, and he gives me his first name, and I said last name, and I looked at him, and I started laughing because I knew this guy, and he did like 35 years, and really really good guy. He's an artist, a very accomplished artist. I mean, very very good artist. And so next thing you know, the interview or the intake turned into like an impromptu reunion, and we're just sitting there for a long time, just talking about people who we knew and things like that. So moments like that, and when you can actually also help guys, they come in and they don't have anything, and they're like, I don't have this, I don't have that, and and I can see or hear in their voices that they're worried about what they're going to do, and to be given an opportunity to say, hey, look, here's what we're going to do. We're going to help you with your housing situation, or we're going to help you get this and that, and help them get the clothes, and show them about how to go about getting a job and everything like that, to get identification and things like that, and then to see how confident they are that they can make it. When they go out the door, when they call me back a few days later and say, hey man, I got that job, and I'm looking forward to doing this and that now, and they might call me back a month later, and we talk about how they're getting along with their family, their grandkids and stuff like that. So yeah, it makes it very much worth it to be able to do that.
Abe, I just have one more question to ask you before we wrap up. The justice system clearly failed you terribly over 30 years. Every point of the justice system failed you. And as you've, talked to and are working with other people who've gone through that system as well, and it's clearly failed them as well, what would you want to see changed? What do you think it's going to take to change it, actually, to change it so these things don't happen to people anymore?
I've thought about that over the years. One of the main things I think is very important is really accountability, and there's always there's a complete absence of that when it comes to accountability. If you have a surgeon or a doctor who makes a mistake, I mean, they're accountable. They can just, they lose their license or something like that, or anything like that. But unfortunately, prosecutors and specifically, I mean, in my case, you had judges. I mean, they just literally, committed felonies when it comes to some of the things that they did. In my case, in order to convict me, they were never held accountable. And I don't know. I mean, there's still things that are being done, possibly, with regards to my situation and everything like that, but which I won't get into right now. But they haven't been held accountable. And when you don't have accountability, you look at this like this. As a prosecutor, you can go ahead and you can do a lot of the things that were done in my case. And even when it comes clear to light that you're not going to be punished for it, that's not really just a message to that prosecutor. That's a message to all prosecutors. And then you have a culture that begins to thrive. That kind of culture thrives because it's like, hey, I can do whatever I want to do. And it doesn't matter, if this person I sent up was innocent or whatever. And everybody knows that it was clear to me that he was innocent when I sent him. There was evidence of that. It was clear. There were red flags that I should have paid attention to, but I decided not to do it. And everybody knows that I got away with it. And other people, prosecutors who are on the bench right now, or here in court right now, know that, hey, well, if they did that, then I surely could probably do something that's not quite as bad as that, or maybe even just as bad as that, and still get away with it. So that's one thing. The other thing is that what I really would like to see more immediately, and because right before I was incarcerated, there was a massive increase in sentencing in Colorado. I mean, they double, triple, quadruple a lot of sentences, things of that nature. And what I come to notice over the years is like, just to give you an example, you had a life sentence in Colorado used to be 20 years. Before I got locked up, probably about 2 or 3 years before, they had made it 40 years, which was an extensive amount of time. And then a couple years after I got locked up, they changed it to natural life. And there's no room for error when you have something like that. I mean, no room for error. And so what I would really like to see is I would like to see massive sentence reform across the board, because a lot of the sentences that I've seen guys get, and I'm talking about even in the case of some people who were guilty, some of the sentences were just insane. I mean, 120 years for burglary, things like that, for 80 years, 90 years. I know a guy who was doing 80 years for marijuana. He's doing 80 years for transporting, large quantity of marijuana, which is now legal in this state. You know what I mean? And to the best of my knowledge, he's still incarcerated for that. That's insane. You know what I mean? And so what I'm saying, though, I mean, so it's bad enough if a person, is guilty, whereas the sentences, are so out of control. But if a person is innocent, there's just no way. Like I said, my situation is extremely rare, whereas I was granted the clemency. What about people who are still incarcerated? And there are some, believe me, there are other people who are wrongfully convicted, who might not get the clemency, but the system is in such a way where it's impossible for them to even walk it down and even just do a sentence and get out, is what I'm trying to say. If the sentence was still 20 years, ironically, if the sentence was still 20 years, I would have been out over a decade ago. You know what I mean? Even with a wrongful conviction. But I would have been out and been able to have so much more, time left on my life. But because of the way the sentencing is now, there's no room for error, and unfortunately, it's like I said, it's one of the most egregious things that you can actually do to a person. If you're going to have a system where you're going to have no room for error, you better darn sure be sure you know what you're doing and have some serious accountability for times when you don't. When you do make mistakes, or in my case, purposely decide that you're going to ignore evidence and hide evidence and destroy evidence and tell people it's okay to perjure themselves and things like that. So those are two of the things that I would like to see.
Yeah, Abe, thank you for today. This is a really important conversation, and I'm glad that America is having to reckon with this now, and your story adds so much impact to why it's so important. So thank you for today. This morning was very impactful, inspirational, and I hope the audience takes away from this. But also tomorrow, we're going to come back and really dive into your entrepreneurial journey and talk about, because I love the stories you were telling us before about how you spent your 30 years, the last 30 years, and what you did to come out and continue to make an impact. So we'll look forward to that same time, same channel. And thank you again, Abe, for today.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Abe.
I appreciate it. Thank you for the opportunity. It really means a lot to me. Thank you.
You bet. Ubaldo, Nina, thank you both. We'll talk tomorrow.
See everybody tomorrow.
Take care.
Tomorrow.